What's up, guys? So today I'm doing a champion guide on Ukko, a fusion champion that was released I think 7 months ago, and he's definitely maybe top 5 fusion that we have had so far, and people had very high hopes for him when he was announced, and it turned out that his passive wasn't as good as people thought it was. Like, people were kind of making the wrong assumptions based on the tooltip, and it didn't turn out to be as OP as we wanted it to be, but it is still incredibly good for, like, especially arena, and it probably would have been nerfed. It definitely would have been nerfed if it worked the way people wanted it to work, but he's a reviver, he has a decent kit, so he's usable in all content in the game if you're progressing. Definitely like dungeons and Doom Tower waves and bosses, but the two content that people use him in endgame is Hydra and arena defense. And this week that we got the live arena, I think he's definitely one of the top picks in live arena as well. He fits it really good. He isn't really used in arena offense because polymorph is kind of risky and it adds inconsistency. And in classic arena, when you can pick all of the fights like beforehand and you know what you're fighting, you don't want to pick any fights that have any risk, and you want to go for the fastest and safest possible fights. So that's why he isn't really used. But in live arena it's a lot more complicated, and it works the other way around as well, that pretty much everybody always has a chance to lose against Ukko, and we will go later in the builds why is that, but let's quickly go through his kit so we have a better understanding what he does. So his A1 has 50% chance to place a 50% decrease attack, which goes up to 75% with books, and it is AoE hit, so this is definitely one of the best A1s in the game. Like, A1s tend to be, I guess, balanced on purpose to be pretty basic, and usually they don't do anything good, but this has like incredibly strong effects because decrease attack is a very powerful debuff in the game, and that's why it is so good in arena and bosses like Hydra. And the A1 has very good synergy with his other skills as well, which is like, it is clearly like they had a team in mind when they were making this champion, and it all makes sense. It's kind of like Rotos, like when he has 3 different skills or passives that give him extra turns, and then he gains damage over time during the fight. It is like a perfect synergy, and it is kind of the same deal with Ukko as well. So his A1 places the decrease attack with AoE, and his A2 attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has 75% chance to remove 2 random buffs from the target, and also places a block buffs, debuff, and 50% decrease attack for 2 turns on targets that have no buffs after the attack. And of course this is incredibly good combination with his A1, because first you use this skill and then enemy loses their immunity and all other buffs, and then you can place like attack down on them and they will do way less damage. Even though this skill doesn't remove all buffs from enemy, it hits them 2 times and removes 2 buffs each time, so basically in total it's 4, and it scales to like 100% with books, so basically it removes everything. And this also screws many champions very strongly. Like, let's say something like Leorios, who will get like unkillable buff on himself when he goes low HP because of his passive, and many other champions have like that kind of stuff on them, and this will block all of those from happening. And many of the nukers in this game, they highly rely on the attack buff on them, like something like Baron or Rotos or Georgid. they have so much damage that they can kill champions often even without attack buff. But many of the popular nukers don't have it, like they definitely need the attack buff. And if they are against tanky enemies and they have their attack buff removed, stolen, or maybe they even have decreased attack on them, they will not have enough damage to kill like strong revivers, or even like not even super strong revivers, just kind of squishy revivers. They might not even have enough damage to kill. And this is why this skill has very strong synergy with his A1 and makes it a top tier skill for Arena. Now, if we look at his A3, it's a revive that revives all dead allies with 40% HP, then places block damage buff on them for 1 turn, also places 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. And this skill is kind of double-edged sword. It is one of the things that players were complaining a lot about when they finally got him during the fusion. And on the like AI settings, or the AI will use this skill even if no allies are dead, unlike many of the other revives in the game. So you can kind of waste this skill when nobody is dead, and then when they do die, you will not be able to revive them. But it is still a very good skill, and the fact that it revives them with block damage can sometimes be very impactful in Arena, because that will guarantee that those champions usually get a turn, and maybe they will like heal the team or kill the enemy target or do another revive, but it is a very powerful thing in Arena. And like I said, in like Hydra and PvE content, people often don't like this skill because the AI will waste the revive, and that's why he kind of doesn't work as the only revive in the team, and he isn't really used as reviver. He isn't something like Duchess or Siphi that you build kind of tanky and they are able to like keep the team alive, even though he does have revive, but he kind of feels a different role, and he's maybe more like CC oriented, or like not stally but like aggressive support. And then his passive has 50% chance to steal 1 random buff from enemy every time they place them. And there was a lot of confusion around this skill, and it also protects the buffs that it steals. But so let's say enemy places like, let's say enemy does 3 buffs at once, and everybody in their team gets 3 buffs. It doesn't have 50% chance to steal all of them, it just has 50% chance to steal 1 of them. So it isn't as incredibly powerful as it might sound, but it is actually. But every time, even though it only applies once every time enemy places a buff, even if they place multiple different buffs, but there is many like small buffs in this game that are not very like big deal. Like let's say enemy Duchess does her A1, which puts a small shield on 1 random target, but then this passive can even proc from that, and it can't just steal the buff that the target places, but it can steal any buff from the target or the other champions in their team. So let's say enemy Duchess does her A1, and then Ukko steals, I don't know, Stone Skin from their Python. Like, it doesn't work just for the shield that Duchess placed. And because the buffs will be protected, and because it can be any buff, like it can be Stone Skin from one of their supports, or it can be attack buff from their nuker, and this works even if he's locked out without resistance. So this is incredibly disruptive, and sometimes if you get lucky with this skill, it just completely like ruins the enemy team, and let's say they lose their attack buff at the start of the fight, and then they're not able to finish your team and you win the fight. And this is kind of the ongoing theme on his kit, that he is very like disruptive and like RNG oriented. He isn't like he isn't your typical Duchess that He's a tanky, reliable reviver. He's more like RNG thought machine that the enemy doesn't want to face. Even if they likely will win, they usually have a chance to lose anyway, and they rather don't want to take the risk against him, and that makes him incredibly powerful because in classic arena, arena defense isn't just can you beat the enemy team, that is kind of actually like a secondary objective. Some teams try to win enemy teams more than others, but the primary thing about your arena defense is actually that people will not attack you, and that is very important. He's not as popular as, let's say, Maritska or Taras or Rotos. Well, maybe you can't even put Rotos on the same level as the others, but he is on similar level as, let's say, Duchess, Necret and Rotos nowadays. He's maybe like tier 2 arena defense champion. Not right in the same level as the top ones, but usually every week you will see a few Ukkos in top 20 of like Platinum Arena. But let's actually go his build, because that is very like defining part about him. So there is basically 3 different builds on him, or I mean there's more, but 3 basic ones. But the popular build in Platinum Arena for like, I don't know, past 4 or 5 months has actually been building him in stun or taunt set. And this might seem kind of like a weird choice, and it isn't a typical build that you do on other champions, but it has incredibly good synergy with his kit. Ukko is kind of the new version of Hegemon, and Hegemon used to be incredibly popular in arena defense, because if enemy doesn't have immunity against him, then there is a chance that he might lock their cooldowns, or he might reduce their turn meter with his A1, but he added a lot of like inconsistency and RNG to the attackers, and it helped them to like speed control the enemy so that the lockout that you had in your defense, it could go before the enemy team. Ever since Reaction and Stone Skin, Hegemon has gotten less and less popular, and there's a few different things, but Hegemon isn't threatening as a nuker anymore, because usually enemy will have Reaction and Bolster and Stone Skin, combination of all of them, so he isn't really gonna kill anybody. Usually, like maybe some nuker that doesn't have Reaction and isn't protected by Necret, but if enemy has Hegemon, then you will probably use a different team anyway. But it could do that, and it could also it could be built as a nuker, it could be built as a pure CC champion in stun set, like Ukko is, or it could be like a hybrid version between those two. But also, if your champion is in Stone Skin, turn meter reduction doesn't apply to it. So you can't place the block cooldowns, you can't place decrease attack, and you can't even reduce their turn meter with Hegemon. So Stone Skin and Reaction kind of nullified him and made him a lot less usable. Now he's still used a bit in offense, but he isn't used in defense at all. But Ukko is the new improved version of Hegemon for arena defense, and basically has taken the role of Hegemon as like a stun or taunt set user. And the way stun Ukko is generally built is that, let's actually take it from, so we can get a better impression from the Hell Hades website. Okay, this time I'm gonna move myself because I get always complaints about this. But okay, so this is how I have Ukko built, as you can see from the Hell Hades website. And this is typical way that you would build a stun Ukko. Basically, he's not gonna be tanky, so you're not even like HP and defense are completely secondary in building him. The main objective is having him be as fast as possible in a stun or taunt set. And if he's faster than the enemy, then there is always a chance that he will remove immunity and other buffs on them, and then stun them. And if they get bad RNG and they get stunned, that might be it, and they lose the fight. Now, you will want a decent amount of accuracy on him, but it isn't like priority. Like, I would say that you want to get at least 250, but even 250 is like good enough. Like, it might not be able to remove buffs from champions that have built resistance, but generally if something is built in resistance, you will need way more than 400 anyway, so it often doesn't make any difference. And sometimes it might even be that, let's say enemy uses a Duchess in offense, and the Duchess might have Polymorph, and because of Polymorph also giving resistance, the Duchess might be in a decent amount of resistance. Let's say it is in like 3 to 400, which some of the endgame players might have champions even if they didn't build them on resistance, just because they have good gear and like empowered champions and faction guardians. And at that point, the Duchess might sometimes resist Ukko, which might even be good because he wouldn't get polymorphed. But even with like 250 accuracy, he will definitely have enough accuracy to buff strip the enemy nukers and the important champions. And I would say that like there is other builds that you can do on Ukko. The fast stun build isn't completely the only way. You could build him in fast Swift parry. We used to see this build a lot like when he was new, and you could definitely build him as a tanky like Stone Skin or Bolster champion as well. But the one build that I wouldn't do on Ukko at all is resistance build, and that is because he has much lower base HP and even base resistance than champions like Duchess or Siphi. So those are much better options for resistance build. And also because he can kind of function even if he is locked out, because his passive can still work and his A1 can still decrease the enemy attack, and it might even stun if he's in stun set. But also I would say that, as you can see in my build, it's mostly focusing on speed, though it has a decent amount of like tankiness as well, but not like incredibly tanky. But I'm even using like flat HP gloves, which might seem very like weird for many players, but you actually see this quite a lot in like top arena, that when you build champions for like speed, you truly don't care about the tankiness, because they are not gonna be tanky anyway. Like, it doesn't matter if this Ukko is 70k HP or 100k HP, when the enemy Baron does 200k with their AoE nuke anyway. So I wouldn't, it might seem like you don't want to do this, and maybe you will use like percentage HP gloves with maybe no rolls in speed at all, but you definitely don't want to do it. If you go with this build, then you go with the fastest speed as possible. But if you make a Ukko that isn't in stun set, then maybe you can make it slower as well. But in this build, speed is definitely the priority. And another thing that is very important is that revenge accessories have insane synergy on Ukko, so you definitely want to use them even if you lose stats. Like, I would even say, like, definitely if you have HP or defense ring, you want to use it. But I would even say that if you have attack ring on like revenge for Ukko, you want to use it. But I would say that on banner, you want to get the banner that gives you more speed, as I mentioned before. And let me quickly fix that. And then if we quickly look at his blessings, so mostly I would say that you use Polymorph on Ukko, because he's generally like arena defense champion. And I mean, I have a specific video about Sheep, you should watch it. Many people don't know how it actually works. It is way better than it sounds on paper. But the short version is that Polymorph has a chance to interrupt enemy skill, and if it does it, then they won't do any other debuffs on the skill, and they won't even do damage. But I explained the full details about it in another video. But this is mostly what you see in Platinum Arena, basically for the same reasons that I mentioned, that the entire purpose of Ukko is that he's a big dice roll, and enemy has to take chances, and he isn't a guaranteed win and safe fight for enemies. So this just adds more to that. And you could definitely use other masteries as well. Like, I will say that if you make a tanky build, you could consider Ward of the Fallen. Also, if you use like Ukko in some kind of very fast team, maybe you have like a stun Ukko with like speed Siphi, you could consider this. But Temporal Chains does have kind of negative synergy with Ukko because he does remove the enemy buffs, so it kind of goes against it. But if you do use a speed team, then you would probably still want to use this on Ukko anyway. But pretty much I would say that you use Polymorph. I mean, I guess you could consider Intimidating Presence in a speed team as well, but yeah, those are the options. And if we take a look at the masteries, this is very basic masteries. I will say that on the first rows, this is just for tankiness and what you would generally see on every support champion. But the few things that are very important and distinct on Ukko build is that Fearsome Presence works both with Stunset and with Polymorph, and even with something like Frostbite 2-piece. You could even build him in Stunset and 2-piece Frostbite, and this would apply to all of them, and you will get 5% higher chance to CC them. So you definitely want to get this, because you're not gonna be tanky anyway, the other masteries don't make any difference in this build. And like I said, you don't need high amount of accuracy on Ukko, so this is completely wasted. And the CC from sets like Polymorph, Stunset or Frostbite, they don't need accuracy anyway, like they will CC the enemy regardless of your accuracy. There is no resistance check on those. And the other important masteries are the ones that give you turn meter or speed. These ones you definitely want to get. And of course, Master Hexer will increase the duration of your block buff and attack debuff on enemy. But let's try him a bit in arena so we can get some visual impression about him. Let's just try a few different teams. I guess we will start with the easy one. This is kind of outdated team that you might have seen maybe a couple years ago, but not nowadays. But yeah, let's just use my default teams against it. But basically what's gonna happen is that Ukko is the fastest champion in the team, and this is something like what you would see in actual defense team. Like this specific team, I have finished top 20 a couple times, and I have seen other people use this exact same team, but generally you would have Ukko with another reviver and then a nuker and something else in the team. But basically, because Ukko is the fastest champion in the team and is generally faster than most of the champions in enemy team, if it isn't a speed team, then it should be the fastest champion in the fight. And because it goes first, now we will roll the dice and we will see that does somebody get CC'd, and now they will get block buffs on them, so they will not even be able to get the increased attack from Arbiter. But let's see what happens. Okay, so three of them got stunned, and basically that's it. At this point they lost. And of course, if enemy is able to go first and CC Ukko, like maybe they have a fast lockdown, then that is one way to deal with Ukko. Though, let's say that they don't have immunity buff on their nuker, then even with A1, Ukko might be able to stun them. But let's say they have like fast Yumeko, and then they have a Necret and a nuker, then that will be able to deal with Ukko fairly well. So I did one fight there, but I totally lost my voice during that fight, so I had to cut the clip. This team also looks like something you would see in like offense, so this is kind of good example. Like my team is gonna be a defense team, and his is gonna be the offense team. And yeah, so was it 2 or 3 champions in his team got stunned, and his snooker got stunned, so that's pretty much it. Like he lost all the momentum, and it is kind of hard for him to catch up at this point. And of course, now that his champions died or had their buffs stripped, they won't have immunity on them. Well, I guess he does because he has 2 immunity champions, but generally then they are very susceptible for like attack downs and stuns from the stun set. And definitely both stun set and down set will work. Like I would use whichever one you have faster gear on, but I haven't really farmed a lot either one of those dungeons, and most people don't farm Ice Golem, so likely you will have better stun set than you do down set. Let's see. Oh, and here we can also see that there is like some people also using Ukko, so this is kind of good example. Let's actually try it against this team. This looks kind of very good team because it has Maritzka and some of the other top champions. Let's see how this plays out. Now this team, yeah, nice. This team doesn't have a Siphi, so the Rotos is very susceptible for the stuns. Though it does have like double like immunity and a cleanse from Maritzka, so it kind of can deal with them. Okay, and there our Ukko got polymorphed, which is gonna happen a lot on him, and there is kind of nothing you can do about it. And that is kind of the reason why he isn't used as much in offense in Classic Arena, because people don't want to take any risks and they want to have very like fast and safe fights. And that's the exact reason why he's so good in defense instead, because the opposite of the same, that people don't want to risk getting stunned by Ukko and losing fight against him or having very long fight. And there you saw that he did like 2 A1s in a row because Duchess hit him and his revenge procced, and then he put the attack down on the enemy. And the Rotos isn't really dealing a lot of damage because you see like 3k A1, because attack down does make a very big difference on nukers. So, and I guess he got sheeped a couple times in this fight, so this isn't going like heavily in my favor, but he's definitely doing his work to like make this fight last as long as possible and making it hard and annoying for the enemy team. And of course, Rotos versus Rotos isn't a great matchup if we do this with like AI, because the Rotos will always like hit each other's unless they do the A2, which will target the champion with highest HP so that it can steal a lot of HP. But they will keep hitting each other's and they will not really kill anybody because they can't one-shot each other's, and there's a lot of heals in both teams. But this is just like example, like in practical situation you would target one of the champions and not do it like this. Of course, in that sense this is kind of good example, because using your own Rotos against enemy Rotos teams can be a very good way to counter them, because as you can see, my Rotos keeps hitting his Rotos and he's not killing anybody because of that. But yeah, maybe maybe let's just end this fight and do a bit of manualing, because this fight is going nowhere. But as you can see, even after 3-minute fight, and after that Rotos has done his A2 many times, he barely did any damage to my dodges because of the constant A1s from the Ukko. And let's say you have something like Necret or ally attacks in the team, maybe you have like Cardiel or something else, you can even do more A1s with Ukko and have even more chance to like stun the enemy team. Nice, there we got another stun. But yeah, let's just end this fight. We don't want to be here all day. Anyway, as you can see, he is highly effective, and I definitely do recommend you guys on building him. But I would say that the other builds are totally viable as well. Like, you could just build him very tanky and hope for his passive to proc and disrupt the enemy team. But in the top arena, like for the meta slaves, this kind of CC and like stun or taunt build is definitely the flavor of the times, and it isn't just like the past like couple weeks. This has been the way that people have been building Ukkos for, I don't know, maybe like past 5 months or something. And many have had very good success with Ukko. Like I said, I was using him in my main defense team many times, and I finished top 20 with him multiple times, so. But anyway, I think that's it for this video, and I will probably do another live arena video later today or tomorrow, but thanks a lot for watching, and if you have any questions about this, then please let me know in the comments.